Now, we have, of course, heard now a lot about the theory around RRI and implementing RRI, and now this session is really the practice, how to apply it on the ground. So I am, so as Gordon said, a marine ecologist, and so we were given the top-down survey to establish how RRI ready we were, and I don't know whether people know that, but as marine researchers, we are actually very used to dealing and establishing and quantifying baselines. So if, for example, just around here, we wanted to establish a wave power device, and we wanted to know whether that affects the fish communities, we would have to do a baseline survey, and we have to be very specific what exactly we are measuring and how we are measuring it, and so that part made total sense to us, that we would have to establish a baseline. And but I want to, before I start, so if I want to do 2 minutes on something that we as marine researchers call the shifting baseline syndrome. That is something that we deal with a lot, and I want to take 2 minutes to tell you a bit about it. So if it's like 2 minutes on things about marine research you never thought you wanted to know. And what the baseline says, the shifting baseline syndrome says, is that, of course, you have a project on, say, a wave power device, or you want to establish how fishing practices have changed the fish community. But what you have to be mindful of is that your baseline is a fairly arbitrary point in time, usually linked to a project or any particular interest. But what you have to be mindful of is that changes have happened for a very long time, probably before, or for certainly that the baseline you are dealing with is, it is in marine research, for instance, you have already a baseline of a very disturbed or modified fish community ecosystem. And what you are measuring is just sort of a subtle change in this particular status that you have measured. But importantly, you should know what was the pristine state of your environment and how quickly it has changed. And I felt that had also an effect on what we were doing now with RRI. For instance, when we were giving the top-down survey, I was very mindful that whether or not there had been change in our organization for a long time. For instance, in gender equality, it could be that your institution, your organization has done some work for many, many years, and you have already committees in place, you have governance structures in place, you have already a lot of strategies in place, and you have staff particularly who is interested and can be allies to you. But it could be also the flip side, you might have one of the pillars where nothing has happened for a very, very long time. And that doesn't mean that the status of that particular pillar, this aspect, is poor, but there hasn't been change, and that means that you trying to change something, to create an action, you will have problems to find allies. You will really struggle to persuade somebody to buy into this. Or you might have the situation that you had step changes. There might have been champions for really ambitious people on public engagement. But then, and the organization improved, but then you didn't have anything for a very long time. So that was all of that I had in mind when we tried to establish our baseline. And because GRRIP really was just this arbitrary point in time. Now, I want to go through that experience. It's really the experience we had in Swansea. I want to focus on 3 points that I thought were important in this whole top-down survey that really influenced my work. And I want to talk about data, accessibility, to information and internal communication. Data. Data are your friend. Data will tell the story of what your organization is doing. This slide shows the data that is an infographic that is published every year in Swansea in the Equality Report, and it's just a summary. So it is altogether a 30-page report, really drills into detail, but it gives really a picture of who are we in Swansea in terms of equality. So it shows everything from the average age of staff, how the ratio between men and women, so how that differs also in academia. In professional services, for instance, we have more women working in Swansea than men, but among the academics, male staff are still the more dominant group. You get a picture of the diversity in terms of race, sexual orientation, how many disabled people were there, how many men take parental leave. And all of that, so of course, creates a picture of who we are. But it's only been, or we can only produce, or could produce these reports for the past, I think, 4 or 5 years, because the amount of information you need to produce something like that is phenomenal, and your institution really needs to commit to collecting and joining up all these data. This also helped us when we, as Biosciences, applied for Athena Swan Award. Athena Swan is an accreditation body acknowledging your status in terms of gender equality, and particularly the promotion of women. And it helped us a lot because in the application that you make, you have to provide a lot of really nuanced data. And the fact that the university as an organization was collecting everything from, of course, the gender per grade, per career strand, the ethnicity, we could combine all that data and create the picture for biosciences and then make the application. But what it takes is, of course, your organization needs to commit to collecting these data, so to have people, database managers, people who can create databases, who can translate information needs into spreadsheets that will allow you to combine this kind of information. Then the second point is, of course, how accessible is the data. And when we try to do the top-down survey, most of my time went into figuring out who holds the data in your organization. If it is a small one, you might know even the person in human resources, but we are 4,000 staff. So which department holds it? Which groups within departments? And then, am I allowed to hold the data? And Patricia and I and Fernando, we had a lot of discussion. What's going to happen with the data? Because it is a lot of very personal information. The university, the organization, ensures that personal information doesn't get out. So you have to make sure that the information is anonymized to a degree that personal data protection isn't breached. And we had to have an arrangement, and the university asked for a commitment not to publish, for instance, the raw data of, that I would give. There was also actually a problem we had with the training data that was mentioned before, because some of the data in Swansea certainly is not joined up. So all the training data we would have liked to have had, so training in terms of gender and grade, whether just junior staff are trained or not, we could not provide that because we all have our own record of training, but it's not joined up with the rest of the human resources data. So I failed to deliver that. The best data provision is always when it is online on your institutional webpage. And that is, I think, that what we all found, so also for Patricia and Fernando, so as soon as they could access that information, the strategy documents, so that was when we could really make headway with creating this the baseline. And the same was the case for ethics in Swansea. So every single research process goes through an ethics committee approval process, and all the background policies, the strategy documents, the governance structures, minutes of meetings, everything is published on our internal website. And the same also with open access. The university pushes everybody, all staff, to publish open access, and in order to enable them to do that, there is a plethora of information on the website in different formats, and there are documents, there are training, videos, how to do it, and so that, I think, works very, very well. So I think the aspiration should always be for an organization to have as much of the, I have 3 minutes, thanks, of the information online. Internal communication, that was something, when I did the top-down survey, I was actually ashamed how many things were new to me. I've been working for Swansea University for 20 years, and there were many aspects that I didn't know, and I ought to have known them. And then talking later with Patricia and Fernando, they also said, you know, you do so many things so well, but when we speak to your staff, they don't know about this. And that, of course, there is room for improvement, and there's probably room for improvement on a personal level, but also on an institutional level. Obviously, so you get 20 emails per day from your institution, and perhaps you work against a deadline, and they tell you about a new development in ethics, but you just delete it. So the question is, can we do something better, be more engaged personally, but also perhaps institutionally? It may be a good idea that it's not just one email, but that really there is a more active discussion in staff meetings, in departmental meetings, to make RRI more part of our research culture. So in summary, your friend is data. Data tells stories. Make sure that the data is as accessible as possible if you want to improve RRI, and make sure that you discuss it internally so that you reap the benefits of all the work. Thank you.